A very good morning, all of you. The last session we discussed about the introduction to the metal forming process. I will continue that remaining part. So the module 1, module 2, module 3 that are related to the machining or metal cutting process. That is becomes under in the manufacturing science. So what is the manufacturing science? A product can be manufactured with the help of a raw material into useful product by using some manufacturing process. Where different types of the manufacturing process are available with respect to the type of the product material. You have to choose the manufacturing process. So far we discussed about the machining process that we called as the metal cutting. Okay, we have to remove the material to get the final products to fulfill the customers. Okay, also we discussed about the different types of the machines, its operations. Okay, depending on the type of the operation, you have to select the material, to select the machines. Okay, we have the different manufacturing process. In that we studied metal cutting, the one part. Now second we have the metal forming. The module 4 and module 5 are related to the metal forming process. Okay, also we discussed what is meant by metal forming process. Yes, anybody just reply me the meaning of forming. What understood the meaning of metal forming? Yes. So these are the some concept how to cover in the module 4. That is first one is introduction to metal forming process. Already you discussed in the previous class. In that we have the classification of metal forming process. Okay. The next concept is most important, that is hot working and cold working of the metals. Then we have the different techniques of the metal forming process, that is forcing, rolling, drawing and extrusion. The only concept related to these techniques have to study. Okay, what is mean by a metal forming process? So what we did in the metal cutting, to remove the unwanted material from the workpiece or product to give the final shape to the that product, that we called as the metal cutting. For that we use the different metal cutting tools. Okay, but in metal forming what we do here, we no need to remove the material from the workpiece. Okay, have to apply the external force to the object to form a desired shape and size. The external force means we have the different forces can be applied on the that object. It may be compressive force or tensile or bending or shear force. Okay, so don't leave the class. Sanket Chikode. Once the force is applied on the workpiece, it will take its shape without removing the material. But what happens there? I told the principle of plastic deformation. Okay, once you apply the force on the workpiece with the help of plastic deformation, so what is plastic deformation? Okay, this also I told the meaning of plastic deformation. So deformation means there will be change in the dimensions. So once you apply the force on that object will be change its shape and size, but it is not possible to retain its original size and shape. That we call as the plastic deformation. If it comes with its original shape and size, that we call as the elastic deformation. Okay, with the help of the principle of plastic deformation, the material will be change its size and shape. without material removed from the workpiece. Okay, so the standard definition of metal forming is a process in which the desired shape and size of the component is obtained through plastic deformation of the metal. Okay, the term plastic is used for that is behavior of the material, that is permanent deformation of the product. Is the standard definition of metal working or metal forming process. Okay, also we discussed in that various classification of metal forming process. So today class we just go through these classifications of the metal forming process. So basically we have the two types of the metal forming process, that is based on the nature of force applied. As we know, the different types of the forces are available. Okay, which kind of force is required for the different techniques that we see. Again, in that we have the direct compression type process. So this means the compression force is applied on the workpiece directly. The example also I told, that is forging process. The indirect compression type process. Okay, the third one is the tension type process. Then we have the bending type process, then shearing type process. So these are comes in the first category, that is based on the nature of forces applied. Okay, the second one you have the based on the working temperature. So there will be vary in the temperature of the that material, workpiece material. Based on that we have the two types, that is hot working condition and second one is cold working condition. Okay, there will be changes in the crystalline structure of the material. Okay, the crystalline structure means, say the semester we have the material science subject, in that we have the crystalline structure of the materials. There will be changes in the granular changes in the material. When you heat that material, there will change in the microstructure of the that material, that we call as the crystalline temperature. Okay, in detail we see in the later class. First we discussed about the based on the nature of forces. We have the 5 types. Okay, in that first we have the direct compression type process. We see the standard definition of metal forming or metal working is a process in which the desired shape and size of the component is obtained through plastic deformation of the metal. Okay, without any removing the material from the workpiece, you will get the desired shape and size of the component with the help of plastic deformation. So the stresses induced in the metal by the applied forces. So once you applying the forces means there will be some stress will be induced in the top surface of the workpiece. Okay, that is forming process is greater than the yield strength. What is the yield strength or yield point of a material? Yes, it is stress at which material begins starts deform plastically, that we call as the yield strength or yield point. Okay, the component thus formed through plastic deformation processes better mechanical properties than those obtained by casting or machining process. So yeah, already told whatever we getting the properties, physical properties or mechanical properties are is good condition compared to machining or casting process. Okay, here not any material is removed from the workpiece means we have the good properties. Okay, the casting we see in the fourth semester. What is casting in different methods of the casting? Now these are the classification of metal forming process. The first one we have the direct compression type process. Here example I taken forging and rolling. See, in this type of forming process, a compression force is applied. So this capital F is nothing but the compression force is applied directly surface of the workpiece. What happens when you apply the force directly on the surface of the workpiece? This is hot metal billet or workpiece it is. Okay, so the metal flows right angles to the direction of applied force. So once you apply the force perpendicular to the this hot metal, after applying the compression force, the metal will be flows perpendicularly each. Okay, it may be left side or right side. Understood? The compression force is directly applied on the workpiece. If we take the rolling process, so between the two rollers, you have to pass the billet. Here, billet is nothing but raw material or hot metal passed through the two rotating rollers. Through rollers, the compression force is applied. Okay, then the output should be a desired product will be get. Similarly, how the second one, indirect compression type process. So these are the two types of the direct compression type process, that is forging and rolling. See in detail what is forging, different types of the forging defects. Similarly, rolling we see in the later classes. Just understand the concept, the meaning of forging and rolling. Okay, the process of plastically deforming metal by passing in between rolls, that is nothing but rolling process. If you see the forging, the workpiece is compressed between two opposing dies. See here, die is nothing but a cutting tools what we use in the machining or metal cutting. Instead of that cutting tools, here we use the metal dies. Okay, and here the surface of the die we have the size whatever we required from the object. Okay, the workpiece is compressed between two opposing dies so that the die shapes are imparted to the workpiece. So whatever the die shapes are there, the same picture will imparted on the hot workpiece. Okay, next we have the indirect compression type of process. The compression force is applied indirectly. Now there are two types again, wire drawing and extrusion. In this type of process also we required a primary applied force, that is tensile force also we required to pull the material. Okay, indirect compression force developed due to the reaction of the workpiece with the die surface that reach high values, resulting in plastic deformation of the work metal. The metal flows under the dies here. If you say a wire drawing, the shape of the die will be give the required size of the this component. Okay, also for extrusion, if you see the extrusion, this is a container, a cylindrical container. Inside we have the billet. Billet is nothing but hot raw material, and front we have the die. These are the die structure. The design of die is very important here. So whatever we requirement of the size and shape of the component, you have to make it the die design. Once you complete the die design, then apply the force from the ram. Okay, the ram applies force on the billet through a die. The metal is removed from the die. You have to call it as the extruded product. Okay, in detail we see in the later classes we have the different types of the explosion process, that is direct explosion or forward explosion process, or indirect or backward explosion process. Okay, that is the direction of the ram and the movement of the material decides the type of the extrusion. Also we have the tension type of process with the help of tension force. Okay, in this type process a direct tensile force is applied to the workpiece during forming. Okay, the stretch forming process falls under the this tension type process. Okay, have to pulling both ends of the workpiece here. Next we have the bending type process. So this type of process involves the application of bending movements where bends are required, especially in the sheet metal working, and also especially with the use of die and punch is required here. Okay, here are the punch and die structure. In between punch and die have to place the workpiece, then have to apply the force on that directly. Similarly here the punch is required to bend the this workpiece material. Next we have the shearing type process. So this type of process involves the application of shearing force. Okay, that will rupture the metal in the plane of shear. Okay, shearing and blanking process both are same. See, if you see this figures here, a punch and die is required. Due to shearing action, there will be a cutting of the workpiece takes place here. Okay, these are the some classification of the metal forming process. Number of times this question will be asked in the exam. So what is meant by metal forming process? Just write down the questions here. What is meant by metal working or metal forming process? In detail explain the different types of the explain the different types of the metal forming process. In detail means you have to draw all the diagrams with respect to forces applied to the workpiece. Has any doubt? The introduction to the metal forming process and classification of metal forming process. Whatever I completed last class, just I repeat. What is mean by metal working process? In detail with neat sketch explain the classification of metal working process. Next we move to the second type, that is based on working temperature. There will be rise and fall in the temperature of the material. By considering that factor, we have the two types of the process, that is hot working process and cold working process. The working is done under hot condition, that we call as the hot working process. Okay, so hot working process means here if the working temperature of the workpiece is above its recrystallization temperature. Now again the term comes here, the what is meant by recrystallization temperature. Okay, but below the melting point, this process we called as the hot working condition. So the working temperature is above its recrystallization means this formation of new grains, that is called as the recrystallization. with the temperature at which recrystallization occurs is called as the recrystallization temperature. It is important to note that the recrystallization does not produce a new structure. There will be changes in the granular structures only. Okay, that we call as the hot working condition. If you see the standard definition of hot working process, see, if the working temperature of the workpiece, that material is above its recrystallization temperature. Okay, the recrystallization temperature means there will be changes in the granular structure of the material. It changes the granular, that we call as the crystallization temperature, but below the melting point. Okay, the material melting point should be below, that we call as the hot working condition. What are the processes are involved in this process? That is forging, rolling, extrusion, drawing and piercing. Okay, this all material should be heat above its recrystallization temperature, but should not be below the melting point. If you come to cold working process, if the working temperature of the material is below its recrystallization temperature or at or near room temperature, okay, this process is called as the cold working process. Okay, below the room temperature or nearer to the room temperature, the working should be done, that we call as the cold working process. Now what are the process comes under this? That is bending, shearing, cold forging, cold rolling, cold extrusion process. Okay, we see all these processes for later classes. What is meant by rolling process, okay, and what is meant by forging. The forging for the cold and hot forging. Okay, that we all see in the later classes. All of understood the meaning of hot working condition and cold working condition. Okay, this is one category that is based on the working temperature of the material. We have the two types. Based on the working temperature, the forming processes are two types. The first one hot working process and second one is the cold working process. So hot working process means the working temperature of the workpiece material is above its recrystallization temperature. So recrystallization means there will be formation of new grains, new granular structures in the material, that we call as the recrystallization. But below the melting point, that we call as the hot working condition. If you see the cold working process, if the working temperature of the material is below its recrystallization temperature or at near room temperature, this process is called as the cold working process. So many times in exam, the question becomes differentiate between hot working process and cold working process. We just write down the second question from module 4. The first question is, what is meant by metal working or metal forming process? In detail with neat sketch, explain the different types of the metal forming process. Now write down the second question. So differentiate between hot working process and cold working process. So hot working means working temperature of the metal is above its recrystallization temperature but below the melting point. What about cold working? Working temperature of the metal is below the recrystallization temperature or at near the room temperature. So tell me the difference between hot working and cold working. So take as a homework, just differentiate two working processes. The next class I will start the first technique of the metalworking process, that is forging. Okay. See, only 9 students are attended out of 19. Hmm. Wait for 2 minutes, I will take the attendance. So is there any doubt in the first concept of the metal forming process? Or have understood the meaning of metal forming process? Why need to study the metal forming process? Okay, the next class I will start the techniques of the metalworking process. Thank you. I will stop here.